The Diary of Thoughts, Part 26. Concepts, Diversity and Logic. Written by Carlos Pacheco, www.diaryofthoughts.com. Concepts are essential to establish parameters leading to conclusions, even if temporary ones. Everything is submitted to a defined concept. Even our behaviors are conditioned to lots of moral, ethical, social, economical concepts and so on. Finally, all of them small, but fundamental, concepts. They are labeled as mere because all of them are temporary, but fundamental at the same time because they match the time and space of their creation and realization, namely putting them in practice. Some time ago, my best friend offered me a book knowing that I'm always interested in learning about different fields of knowledge. Since one of his favorite subjects is about the cosmos and everything that is related to this topic, he gave me a book written by Stephen Hawking and Leonard Malata now called The Grand Design. I reported myself to my youth, where I used to spend whole nights reading Omni magazine, or the books of Aldous Huxley, Philip K. Dick, Carl Sagan, not to mention a lot of other writers in different domains of literature as Carlos Castaneda or Lobsang Rampa and later on the Dalai Lama. Being Stephen Hawking one symbol of the contemporary science, as I call it, it was my great pleasure to read all those lines, still giving myself the right to pose questions leading to personal conclusions. I believe that every concept, even coming from a famous genius scientist as Hawking, is to be analyzed and can be subject to a personal interpretation according to the perception of each one. At a certain point, Hawking mentioned some experiments that were based on simple contexts adapted to a particular environment. This experiment had a very simple principle, which was the study of the behavior of particles facing some obstacles, namely which way they would choose to find their way out of that specific context. At that moment I got the notion of the simplicity of that experiment compared to the complexity of the final conclusions, proving that there is an apparent difficulty to find what it is commonly labeled as complex. At the same time I also thought about the thousands of different experiments that could lead to those same conclusions, some better, others worse or only different. Finally, all these interpretations are not definitive, as nothing is final in life, as every other single concept that will be formulated now or in the future by other fellow genius physicians. Concepts are not definitive as they are only matching segments of time, segments of our time, our imagination, and leading to temporary conclusions. Those same conclusions can rule for some time as a necessity for society to evolve, but other different conclusions will surmount them, as this whole process of concepts and conclusions is based on logic. As logic is endless, as it is extensive and adaptive to everything we make in life, there will never be a final concept or conclusion that will eternally prevail. Only the necessary ones that will correspond to the steps that are imposed to this dimension to reach the top of this enormous ladder called knowledge, may be the final goal of our existence. Finally, all the conclusions coming from scientists, genius or not, can be analyzed by people of common knowledge, based on a different interpretation of the facts and under different contexts or environments depending on the elements that have to be considered to reach a final analysis. The importance of all those conclusions is in direct proportion with the necessity of the moment, also depending on the technological means at our disposal to achieve and develop those concepts. All this corresponds to a chain of natural conclusions, brought to human beings by the creation herself, allowing us to evolve that way. That's why Socrates or Leonardo da Vinci was lead to conclusions under certain basic environments that were indeed considered as sophisticated or simply vague or absurd at the time of history. It's funny that I mention Socrates because, as a philosopher he dared to defy science and its principles and conclusions. In reality, philosophy and science were always hand in hand, since a significant part of scientific findings are based on a certain philosophy and visions that are implicated in individual reasoning. Everything implies a philosophy and everything is relative. Everything in life is relative on its importance, since everything is constantly changing. Scientific concepts are submitted to that rule of nature as any other type of analysis or interpretation, namely in social or economical contexts, depending on the reality of the moments or the elements involved, if we want to call them that. In each conclusion, there is a natural contradiction implied, mostly created by human beings in their way to interpret, analyze and behave. They act according to those concepts that themselves set up to be able to manage their lives, along with all the social and economical elements that are necessary to handle our life in society. The concepts of justice along with other different ideas making an intrinsic part of the rules of society that human being created, don't match the invisible balance that is consistently present and imposed by creation. However, she is there controlling even our behaviors, which represent that the laws of creation are the first ones to be considered in first place. I know that this is hard to accept for the most of us, but if we think carefully, we all get to the conclusion that even our lives are submitted to our mother creation, that originated us all in the first place and controlled us in a precise and definitive measure. Our notions are constantly created by our intelligence being this one brought by creation. This eternal cycle is repeating in a perpetual motion, as the cosmos continues its infinitive road to nowhere, but at the same time leading to everywhere. Maybe there is no nowhere but an everywhere that is present, not to our eyes, but in our souls. Creation made us think about basic rules of behavior as a fundamental foundation to achieve the possibilities to live and evolve in society. Aside that fact, there is subjective analysis concerning the self-made definitions about concepts as justice, dignity, honor, honesty and more, depending on each one's formation and education, also depending on each one's soul. Those same notions are part of a whole program induced in our spirits, but at the same time, they are submitted to an individual choice that creation allowed us all to possess, maybe to create a different meaning to the word diversity than the apparent diversity that is presented to our eyes. In fact, diversity exists in every single event in life, every second of it being different. That's why we are so different from each other, still so similar. After all, that diversity resides in our different souls, still making part of a unique and universal event called creation, finally our origin, our spiritual and energetic mother. We can compare diversity with a rainbow where there are millions of colors expressing their character, their personality and at the same time complementing all other existing colors around. Like any other element present in life, they belong to a whole that is interdependent on its constitution and visualization. Human beings are like small drops in a rainbow, as we all are so apparently different and unique, still being the same in our souls. The only difference that stays within them is the identification of principles and spiritual values and their practice. I know that sometimes it's very difficult to find the logic implied on diversity, as there are lots of things that we'll never be able to understand. Finally, they belong together, making part of a whole thing, allowing us to establish differences and attributing an own scale of principles and values that finally determines our behaviors and actions. Without diversity there wouldn't be logic, and without this last one, there wouldn't be a reason to create concepts about anything. If we look around and examine carefully, everything and everyone matches that existing diversity to which we are submitted to and to which we all make a part. Creation itself wouldn't be possible without diversity. Hank the Voice BEUKEMA reads from the Diary of Thoughts poems, written by Carlos Pacheco.
Rainbows. Rainbows fulfilling the sky, wondering why they can't be there all the time. Rainbows, expressing life, defining colors, like the dreams of ours when we look at the rainbow. Rainbows coming from the rain, sent by the sun, arriving from where everything began, to bring us joy, like a toy sent to a child. Rainbows falling on the ground, like a ladder that leads us somewhere, someplace much better. Rainbows creating illusions that we need, tender drops spreading around, creating life, like a seed before spring, like a newborn brought by your wife. Rainbows making us live, making us believe that we'll join a cloud, and we'll say out loud that we are just rainbows.
The Diary of Thoughts, end of part 26. Written by Carlos Pacheco, www.diaryofthoughts.com.